This is what the Lord's really speaking into me today. And this is what I'm going to leave you with today as you just reflect, go about your day to day reflecting on this. Pay very, very close attention. Paul is facing accusation. Paul, you could say, is dealing with injustice. You could say that Paul is dealing with, you can look at Paul's situation and be like, man, that's not fair. You can look at Paul and say, man, this situation is just not fair. Like, how could this happen? Even for the sake of the gospel, man, Paul, this is just tough. But can I go one step further? Have you ever thought about this, that even in the presence of injustice, there's an opportunity for a prophetic voice in the gospel? We look at Paul's situation and we say, man, it's unfair that Paul would be locked up for 2 years. It's unfair that Paul has the Sadducees and the Pharisees going up against him. It's unfair that Paul would have to confront these things. It's unfair. But what if it was part of God's plan? Fam, just think about this for a second. What if what you see is unfair in your life is part of God's plan to get you somewhere that God wants you to be? What if the situation in your life, even if it's temporary, but it's long enough, just think about it, 2 years in prison. What if the reason why you're here is so that God puts you in a room, in a space, and on a platform that you would have never been in if it had not been for the unfair, unjust situations that you find yourself prior to that? Look at what God says to Paul. Verse 11, 23 verse 11, I'm going to leave you with that. But the following night, the Lord stood by him and said, be of good cheer, Paul. Like they're banding to kill him. Paul's facing accusation. But look what it says, be of good cheer, Paul. For as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must also bear witness at Rome. Just think about this for a moment. Paul is stepping into a season where he will face accusation after accusation, where he's going to be bound and imprisoned, where people are going to want to kill him, where people hate him. Paul's dealing with all kinds of opposition. And yet God tells him to be of good cheer. Because not only will you testify of me in Jerusalem, but I need to take you to Rome. Paul would not get to Rome if it had not been for the accusations and all the things that we just read about that he would face. If he wasn't in jail for 2 years, if he didn't face the opposition of the Pharisees and Sadducees, if they didn't plot to kill him, if none of those things happened, Paul may have never had an opportunity to preach the gospel in Rome. And this is a message for some of us here, that maybe God is putting you through a season of pain. And maybe God's got you in a season where you're facing accusation. And God has you in a season where you are confronting opposition. God has you in a season where life just doesn't seem fair. Maybe it's not about fairness, it's about the glory of God. And maybe he's got you in this season now because God is putting you through this season to prepare you for a platform that he's about to take you into in the next season. Maybe the reason why you're going through what you're going through now, as painful as it may seem, maybe if you heed the voice of God, it might be just the will of God to reorient you and to guide you into where he's calling you next. Maybe God's calling you to a season of pain. He's calling you to a season of hurt. And he's telling you, be of good cheer. Because I know you've been faithful here. But now I'm going to ask you to remain faithful, even in prison and even in accusation. because I'm calling you to an even bigger platform. Rome is the capital of the world. And God said, Paul, you're going to go through all of this now so that I can be preached in Rome.